But that timeline makes a lot of sense because the Great Awokening in the media happened. It had a so sociologists have found that it had like a very specific starting point, which was around 2011, 2012, when the New York Times erected its paywall, not coincidentally. That's when you started to see woke terminology start to just absolutely skyrocket across the major mainstream liberal news media. So sociologists have literally trawled the archives of the New York Times and the Washington Post and NPR and the Atlantic and all of these outlets, and they found that words like oppression, marginalization, the word people of color near the word oppression or marginalization, white privilege, it's like a hockey stick. Yeah. Like they were kind of like this until 2011, 2012, they started to totally skyrocket. And what happened in 2015 was white liberals, their opinion, as it was polled by sociologists, so public opinion among white liberals started to outpace public opinion of blacks and Latinos in terms of how radical it was on issues of race. So that impact of the skyrocketing of the use of these terms in the liberal media, by 3 years later, 4 years later, by 2015, it had this huge impact on public opinion of white liberals to where they became much more extreme in their views on race than blacks and Latinos and started using this very academic language. And that's kind of where the Great Awakening started.
Did you see that one study that showed liberals, white progressives, are the only racial group in the United States with an out-group preference?
Yes.
So what that means is people who are Hispanic or Latino slightly tend to prefer being around people who are Hispanic or Latino. Black people slightly. It's like, I think, 18% of 100. So it's like, it's low, but it exists. White conservatives slightly prefer to be around white conservatives, and liberals prefer not to be around white people.
Did you notice?
That's just weird.
Yeah, there's also a correlation with the graph that you were mentioning that I've been seeing online with, of course, Occupy Wall Street, and some people theorizing that this was the corporate media's response towards people going against the big banks, going against the big institutions that have failed them, going against the banker bailouts that have redistributed wealth to the very rich, taken away from the very poor. And from what I'm seeing, it's a perspective of, holy crap, people are catching on to what we're doing. We need to divide and conquer them. Therefore, let's inject this language, which will help do that. Do you think that is a possible theory?
Okay, so I'll give you a less conspiratorial version, and then you'll tell me if you find it convincing enough to abandon the more delicious conspiratorial version, which I could totally see why that's like a satisfying way to think about it. And I totally agree that this Great Awokening moral panic about race is a distraction from the real divide in America, which is the disgusting levels of income inequality and the class divide. So I agree with that part of it. I do personally think from the point of view of the news media, this was much more about the digital revolution in terms of media. I think it coincided with the New York Times erecting its paywall because what they started to do was what all of us in digital media do, which is be able to track what terms people clicked on, what terms made them close the browser, what words made them share things, what words made them engage online. And of course, engagement is the big measure of success for digital media. And so I think that there's a much less kind of big picture. There's just like a profit margin to where journalists have always been more liberal than Americans at large. But here you had their corporation saying, no, chase that, racial liberalism because our audience likes it.